Hi everyone, I hope you're doing really well wherever in the world that you are. Whether you are watching this on Facebook or YouTube, I hope that recently you've realised that slowly but surely I have been uploading more video content. Now on YouTube I have started experimenting with the idea of vlogs and mostly vlogging protests or political events or social issue events that I am attending. If you are watching this on Facebook, please do me a huge favour, go over to my YouTube page and subscribe and help me out build a bit of a platform there, because that is really important to me. On Facebook, of course, I've recently started doing more Facebook lives. Now they are quite primitive in the sense that I just kind of either hold up my mobile or try and balance my selfie stick to talk to you guys. I really love interacting with you all, and I hope that I can get a bit of a better setup soon in terms of my Facebook lives and find a way to read the comments in a way where I'm not squinting and having to like zoom in my face right into my phone. Really though, in the last few months since I started doing more videos, this type of video that I'm about to record is the one that I've wanted to try out. Now I've been stopped by two things. One, which I suppose is a personal hurdle that I needed to overcome, and one is a more practical one. Firstly, as you may or may not be able to tell, I'm just recording with my iPhone right now and without any microphone equipment. As most of you know by now, I kind of have come from a professional journalistic background, and to me I was avoiding doing videos at all because I wanted everything I put out to be of a really high quality, and I ended up procrastinating because it's not always that you feel like doing a video. When you have that kind of urge or vibe to do them, you just want something simple to be able to record. And honestly, for me to grab down my DSLR, which I don't know how to use that well, I'm not a professional camera person, and set it all up and try and get perfection, it was ending me up with a lot of procrastination and ultimately not doing them. So the vlogs I have done in the Facebook lives have just basically been me jumping into this and saying I should start somewhere. And so that's in terms of that, and I've now decided the same with this pre-recorded video. The second is a more practical problem, which is that my upload speed on my internet is really slow, and uploading becomes really frustrating and ends up being out there to you guys with about a 24-hour delay. I suppose at some point that's something I need to decide whether to invest in to be able to upload for you all quicker. The reason I like these pre-recorded videos over the Facebook lives is because, as those of you who know me or have been following me for a while know, once I get into a topic, I have been known to, I'm not going to call it rambling because I think all the points are valid and good, but let's say I like expanding an argument or a debate, and it can, you know, go on for a while. So the benefits of the pre-record is, of course, I can try and edit it down or create smaller snippets, she says, while rambling on a 5-minute introduction. Anyway, on that point, let me tell you what this video will entail. What I wanted to do is kind of pick up a few stories that have interested me in my morning kind of look at the press and the media, online and in the papers, and just kind of talk about them with you guys. So that is what we're going to experiment with today. I've chosen 6 topics, and each topic has kind of a few stories that I've seen. So the first is the Labour Party here in the UK. I've picked up a few articles today on that. Another about the IPCC, so that's the Independent Police Complaints Commission, a few stories there. 2 stories about Katie Hopkins and Fatima Manji, so kind of Islamophobia in the media, question mark. the Pope's comments on us being at war, Turkey, developments there, and also the DNC, the Democratic conference that's going on right now. So I know I mentioned Labour first, but actually I'm waiting for some news to break from a court case on whether Jeremy Corbyn can actually run for the Labour leadership or not. So I think I will leave that story because I am expecting it to break halfway through recording this video. So let's start actually with the Independent Police Complaints Commission. Also guys, before I start with these stories, since it is the first video, don't worry, not every single one will have the long introduction or all these caveats. But I just wanted to say that obviously I don't belong to a massive news organisation. I'm not sitting in a morning editorial meeting. Please don't read into the stories I'm including or excluding from a particular video. These are just, you know, I'm not a machine. I don't see everything. Some days I've got more time to sit down in front of the computer and trawl through the news, and others I don't. These are simply stories that I happen to see that have interested me and that I have something to say about. And also the second thing is that they might not necessarily be breaking stories. I might have seen something from a few days ago that I'd missed. It's still interesting and I'm discussing it because, hey, maybe you guys missed it too. So I know I mentioned Labour first, but actually I'm not going to discuss that because any minute now I'm waiting for some breaking news from the High Court on whether Jeremy Corbyn can actually run for the Labour leadership, and that is one of the stories on my list. So as I wait for that to break, I'm going to discuss the other topics. So I will actually start with the IPCC. There's two stories that I picked up on today. One is a story in The Guardian that is headlined "The IPCC, which is the Independent Police Complaints Commission, bungled case against officers accused of abusing a firefighter." I'm just reading off my iPad so I don't get the facts wrong. But basically this is about an incident that happened in 2011 involving a black firefighter, Edric Kennedy McFoy. Now he had approached some police officers to help them identify a young man who had just thrown a rock at the police. But what happened instead was that the police officers turned on Eric and they beat him up and they ultimately tasered him. Now, Eric has said this happened to him because he was black. But what has happened is the IPCC has had to come out and apologise because the disciplinary charges against the Met police officers involved have had to be dropped because the IPCC made key errors. Now, the police have actually paid compensation to Eric Kennedy McFoy, this black firefighter, but he's actually quoted as saying that he feels that he's lost 5 years of his life and that he's been denied justice by this. This story actually came out on Wednesday, yesterday, but I picked up on it looking at some statistics that have come out today, which is about the number of deaths in police contact and custody in the UK this year. So 14 people died in police custody in 2015 and 16. That means after arrest or while in detention. 60 people also committed suicide. Those figures may seem really low, but the important part of the statistics is that in each case, over half of those people had mental health issues. Here in the UK, like in the US, black men in particular are disproportionately affected by these statistics. Now, of course, this comes in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement, where there is a predominant focus on the US. There's a different culture here in the UK. In the US, there is a massive gun culture that we here in Britain simply do not understand. Of course, police and civilians in the US legally can obtain handguns. Again, here in the UK, that is so much more difficult to do. But there are key things, some underlying issues that are similar and should be focused on. When it comes to the Independent Police Complaints Commission here in the UK, I have yet to speak to any family who have had a loved one die in custody or during or after police contact who have been happy with the conduct of the IPCC. They echo the sentiments of this black firefighter, someone who's out on the streets every day risking his life to save others. And I think there is serious questions to be asked. The Independent Police Complaints Commission is a body that is supposed to be independent, where people can go to complain about the police. Now, in reality, the board is made up of mostly former police officers. Now, some people may say that's a good thing because they know how things work. Critics say that means that they're already a part of the boys' club and it's not independent. Often, and I would use the term often because I've followed a lot of these cases, the IPCC have had to come out and apologise for the mistakes that they have made. One really notorious one in recent years is over the killing of Mark Duggan, who was shot dead by police here in London. His death, of course, sparked riots right across the country. A key piece of information was given out to the media by the IPCC in the hours after Mark Duggan was killed. The IPCC said that Mark had shot the police officers first. That turned out to be wrong, and the IPCC had to come out and apologise for that. But by then, the narrative had already been created and the riots were already in full swing. It was like one of those things you see in the press where there's a massive front page headline error and the retraction is a small little paragraph at the back of the newspaper. The other serious issue here is the one of mental health. This is an issue that is similar in the United States and here in the UK. A large proportion of prisoners, a large proportion of those who end up dead in the hands of the police have mental health issues. This is the majority of the people that are being killed or committing suicide here in the UK system when it comes to police contact. Now, there is a really broad discussion to be had about the jail system, policing and mental health at a time where our National Health Service and mental health services are being cut so drastically, and there's a very large body of work that many people who end up going through the prison system should not be doing that, but should be getting help in health centres and hospitals. This is a really serious and foundational crisis on both sides of the pond, something that has to be addressed if long-term solutions are to be created. So, as I said, we're waiting for that High Court ruling, and it has just come in that Jeremy Corbyn can stay on the ballot for the Labour leadership election. The court has upheld the authority and decision of the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party. That is just in as I'm recording, maybe slightly older news by the time you're watching this. But that was one of 3 stories that I'd picked up on the Labour leadership and Labour Party in general. So the second one was a story, actually I should say as well, there's quite a lot of Guardian stories in this episode, but that is just incidental. Hopefully I will try in future videos to have a further cross-section of outlets. But there was a Guardian view on Owen Smith, and it was entitled 6 Weeks to Try Before You Buy. It was an editorial, and basically in a nutshell it was an endorsement of Owen Smith, saying that despite the fact that he's been off to a rocky start, he is now doing better, and he's got 6 weeks to convince people that he is the one to vote for. I mean, it was more nuanced than that, but between the lines it was clear what the Guardian editorial is. There was also another opinion piece, not to do with Guardian editorial, by Owen Jones in the Guardian today, and it was entitled "Mass Membership Alone Doesn't Make a Social Movement." Now, I have mixed views on Owen Jones. I think he wrote a piece a few weeks ago that really encapsulated the position of the Labour Party as it stands. I'll put a link to that article as well. This article, to me, when I was reading it, I got the feeling that he's trying too hard now to be balanced. Perhaps it is the voice of reason that we need, but it's actually not really bringing any solutions. And I think the whole problem with the Labour crisis at the moment is that there are not really viable solutions. There has been so much pressure put on Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters by the mainstream press and mainstream politicians. We can see that that debate and criticism has seeped down to the ordinary debate. However, I do find an issue with the fact now, to be presented or accepted as somebody reasonable, you have to have this kind of 50-50 split of criticism for Corbyn and for the PLP. Or to be seen as a fair and reasonable person, you have to spread your criticism of Jeremy Corbyn supporters and Owen Smith supporters. I don't think that to an extent is fair. I'm not saying to be irrational or not have debate. It's really important that we do. But I think that to deny the reasons we have got to the point that we have is also trying to find a solution that is again built on faulty foundations. A few of the points that I picked up reading the Owen Jones article is that he said that the Labour Party membership is simply unrepresentative of the wider population. Half fall into the AB category, which means they are middle class professionals, when only 22% of the population are. The question that came to me when I read that was, well, what about the Tories? They're even more unrepresentative of the general population. So what this article was highlighting was that just having a social movement or a large Labour membership is simply not enough. You have to act. You have to have a strategy of how you can translate what you are trying to build to the general public. What is the bridge? That is the question Owen Jones has been talking about for the last few weeks. Now, the issue I had with the tone of the article was that he was putting all the pressure on Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters to put up or shut up on this issue. But as I've been saying for the last few weeks, I think that so quickly ignoring the foundational pillars that have got us to this point, evening it out and then saying now everyone's on an even playing field, why are you not doing this, why are you not doing that, it simply doesn't help. What we needed was for the whole of the Labour machine to get behind Jeremy Corbyn and the new movement, to help it become organised, to help it implement and translate its policies to the public. That hasn't happened. Both sides are now so involved in this infighting, they don't simply have time to do those important matters. So what's the difference? One side is already the well-oiled, slick PR machine, full of politicians who have had leadership on their agenda from the start. And the other side simply doesn't have that. Yes, it has to learn, but it also needs space and time to breathe, to be able to learn. And that, I think, was the key issue that was missing from the article. It's as if all the reasons we've ended up to the point we have been ignored. All the reasons there might be deficits on the Jeremy Corbyn side might have been ignored. That's not to say he is never wrong or that the movement is never wrong, but it's not the case that, to be fair, you always have to equally spread the blame. There is a lot more blame, I believe, on the side of the PLP and the Labour movement in general. Okay, you may have noticed two things after the last cut, which is that A, my position might have changed slightly, and secondly, the lighting might be different. That's because my mobile cut out, and I decided I was really hungry, so I ate and then got chatting about another topic with a friend before I came back to record this video, so that is why. Anyway, I got cut off just mid-sentence talking about the Labour Party, but I think I'll leave that there. I'm now going to talk about two other somewhat related stories that I've seen. One is about Matt T, the chief executive of the Independent Press Standards Organisation. He's made some comments to the press today on a bit of an older story. So you'll remember that Katie Hopkins likened immigrants to cockroaches in a Sun column, and obviously the IPSO came out and said that it wasn't going to investigate, and so the chief executive Matt T has come out and said migrants can be called cockroaches because refugees cannot be victims of discrimination as a group. This is from an article I'm reading in the iNews. Now the UN, it says, condemned the depiction of African migrants as cockroaches and a plague of feral humans in the article that came out last year. But the complaint was dismissed by the Press Standards Organisation under the Editor's Code. The watchdog said a discrimination breach could apply only to identified individuals, not to a category or group of people. Now, I find this article quite shocking, actually. I know this whole debate is framed around freedom of speech often, and then it becomes a really sensitive topic. Freedom of speech is a really important topic and it does need to be discussed. However, I think what's happened is that this blurred line of freedom of speech versus freedom, not even to insult, just freedom to be outright racist, has become blurred. We live in a time, unfortunately, where a rhetoric has been created, a narrative of hate. It is seeping out of our political debates, out of our media narrative. It is happening in the UK and in the US, right across Europe. And what's happened is that people have become misinformed about the reasons some really horrible stuff is happening in the world today. They are misinformed as to why ISIS might have come about. They've been told to blame Islam and Muslims solely and not look at foreign policy or regimes funded and supported by our very own governments. They haven't looked at the Iraq war. They haven't looked at the complexities of the situation, because of course those complexities haven't been presented to them. Instead, what's being presented to them is a really simplified form of narrative, one that is really filled with hate, one in which the problems that we see, the terrorism we see in our streets, is solely to do with the Muslim shop owner on the corner of the street, and where all our financial problems and burdens on the NHS have nothing to do with government budget cuts, but ultimately just down to a couple of tens of thousands of immigrants that have come to our shores. Incidentally, these are immigrants that are running away from the ISIS who they blame on Muslims. So basically they are hating the Muslims who are running away from the Muslims who are killing the Muslims. Somehow that makes sense. I'm not trying to belittle, because I know that actually at the end of the day it is information and a more intelligent debate, and not speaking to people like they're stupid that will bring them round. But also we have to realise that with this kind of hate speech, the likes of Katie Hopkins putting forward, when that becomes legitimised, it becomes ever more difficult to bring people round to an argument, because actually now what we have is an environment where racism, anti-immigrant sentiment, Islamophobia, a lack of credible facts for your argument, none of that matters anymore. It is a really toxic environment. What Katie Hopkins said wasn't a breach because it couldn't apply to an identified individual. Of course, since then, again in the Sun newspaper, we've had Kelvin Mackenzie's horrific article on the Channel 4 news journalist Fatima Manji. For those of you who don't know, Fatima Manji is a journalist on Channel 4 News. Channel 4 News is one of our main national TV stations. She happens to wear a hijab. She was reporting the Nice terror attacks, and this Sun columnist put out that it was inappropriate for a Muslim wearing a hijab to report on the Nice attack. This caused a furore. There's been loads of complaints to the press standards organisation. Fatima Manji herself has complained, but let me tell you this, the Sun and this particular columnist Calvin Mackenzie, they are not backing down. Calvin Mackenzie himself has threatened an Ofcom complaint against Fatima Manji for wearing the hijab on Channel 4 News. So this is like where we're at the moment. It's it's gone into attacks on credible, well-known figures on opposing mainstream platforms. I don't think now is the time to dilute our words. We need to be really, really clear that this is Islamophobic hate speech. This is racism out on our streets. We do need to be vocal and stand against it, but at the same time we should reach out to those people who are being misinformed by this rhetoric and are falling onto the wrong side of the argument. And I think that's what's really important, and the balance I always try to strike. I don't always get it right, but it's really important to remember those two things. So really quickly, I also want to bring your attention to the comments of the Pope, which by now probably a lot of you would have seen. He was discussing the recent attacks and that brutal killing of a priest. He said that we must not be afraid to say the truth. The world is at war because it has lost peace. When I speak of war, I speak of wars over interests, money, resources, not religion. All religions want peace. It's the others who want war. And then he went on to say that the word we hear a lot is insecurity, but the real word is war. The world has been in a fragmented war for some time. There was one in 1940, one in 1939 to 45, and now this. And those are really powerful words, because what he is insinuating here is that actually we are in a war. A war, if he's mentioned World War I and then World War II, then what is left? He's saying here that this is World War III. This is the time we're living. And even as I say it, it sounds so sensational. And I know people avoid saying that. And actually, David Cameron here got into a big furore over using that term. But I think that the Pope spoke really powerfully here and chose his words really carefully. He made a point that was really poignant, and I think touches on the thoughts of so many people around the world, because a lot of people do question, we all do, is this what world war looks like? Is this what war looks like in the modern world? Does war have to look like the way we thought it did in World War I and World War II? Does it mean that there are bombs dropping on us every single day? We know the world is a smaller place because we've outreached to each other. Modern technology has made the world a smaller place. We see that in so many places of the world there are bombs dropping every day, and we feel how lucky we are that that's not the case if you live here in Britain or the US or elsewhere in Europe. But we're also seeing things closing in. It feels like almost every day there's an attack in Europe right now. And so I think that the Pope's words are very powerful and give a lot to reflect. Also today there was news that 2 Turkish generals have resigned from Turkey's military council over the string of expulsions following that failed coup attempt in Turkey. Now also there was this news that more than 130 media outlets were shut on Thursday, and it got me to thinking that actually for the last few days I hadn't been keeping up with what had happened in Turkey. So I took a look, and the figures are just astounding. Just to reel them off quickly for you, More than 130 media outlets have been shut, dozens of journalists have been arrested, 15,000 in the education sector, 257 officials at the Prime Minister's office, 492 clerics, 1,500 university deans, 8,800 policemen, 2,700 judges and prosecutors arrested, 6,000 soldiers arrested, 100 generals arrested. And then again, there was a story from yesterday that said actually 149 generals and admirals have been dismissed from the army, and that accounts to roughly 40% of all the generals and admirals in the Turkish military. What is happening in Turkey right now is just absolutely insane. There was that failed military coup, they said, by just a small portion of the army. But why then are 40% of generals and admirals in the Turkish military being dismissed in one single day? Me personally, I don't agree with military coups. It was a crazy night. We all watched what happened in Turkey as that coup attempt took place. And it was actually, let's remember, a bloody night with lots of people losing their lives. But at the same time, I couldn't the next day really partake in a lot of the jubilation that I saw many on social media putting out, you know, that Recep Tayyip Erdogan had done it and the Turkish people had prevailed, because actually what's followed is an unprecedented crackdown. I mean, anybody that is opposing the views of Erdogan are just being purged. There's not another word for it. And that's really dangerous because yes, he does have popular support, but he's got lots of critics too. Turkey's a country with a wide landscape with people with differing points of views, just like every other country. And to alienate and purge out from the establishment everything other than those who mirror you, well, that is a really dangerous step further towards dictatorship. And I think that people need to be wary of that. And that's the case all around the world. When we look at countries in that region or further afield, yes, there's differences on the ground in terms of society, economics and politics, but I think it's just another case with Turkey where actually you're disagreeing with both sides of the power struggle, and ultimately it's the people on the ground that suffer. And just finally and very briefly, do look up what's happening at the DNC in Washington. I mean, we've just talked about a whole bunch of corruption in Turkey as if it's just something that happens in Middle Eastern countries. I've actually had to spend a lot of time today catching up what's happening stateside because there's so much going on. It's hard to keep up with everything. But of course, there's been further WikiLeaks releases on Thursday, this time audio calls. Actually, there wasn't that much substantial in it, but these emails that have been leaked from WikiLeaks proving what so many people had been saying all along, that the DNC were pushing for Hillary Clinton all the way. We had the resignation of the chair of the DNC, but now in these leaks we see the replacement as well implicated in those emails with anti-Bernie Sanders sentiment in their emails. It just seems to be so clear what is going on. And actually, I'd like the take of anybody watching from America who happens to be Bernie Sanders supporters or not about how Bernie Sanders has dealt with this, because it's been interesting for me to compare what's happening in the UK and the United States. The biggest difference, of course, being that in the United States, Bernie Sanders did not win the contest. Here in the UK, Jeremy Corbyn did. There's a really big debate in the left in the United States, just as there is in the UK. And isn't that so fascinating? It's really scary that because of this, the right wing in each country is just getting an easy ride. That's why many are saying that this is exactly the reason you shouldn't be having this debate right now. The other side of the argument is, well, if we do not resolve this debate once and for all in the left, then we will have nothing to say to fight the right. And that is, of course, the many sides of the debate. I'm sure there'll be other opportunities to talk about it too. I hope that this first attempt of a kind of sit-down video going through some news stories was interesting and informative for you. Please give me all your feedback so I can take it forward in my experimentation with these videos. And please, please, please do subscribe, especially to my YouTube channel. Just very quickly, I'm kind of at a crossroads, and I'm really hoping that I can find some sort of stability and potential to carry on creating content online, but I can't do it without the support of you guys who watch. I can't do it without you guys subscribing to my YouTube channel, bringing up my views, liking my Facebook page, and everything else that hopefully I will build towards. Please do that and keep in touch, and hopefully I will try and do another one of these videos soon.